Alrighty. I guess we're going to try and do this. I was going to try and do it inside, and that wasn't working out. I know I'm going to be too loud, so I'm outside, and it's kind of hot right now, so I don't want to walk home. And I'd really like to get another one of these chapters done, so sorry for the angle, but here we go. We're back with Catalyst, the third book in the Transcendence series by Lisa Beeson, Chapter 2. And I found out watching the previous video that whether these are in or out doesn't affect the voice. Except for that, I can't quite hear myself so well, so maybe hello there. It does affect the voice for myself. Alrighty. The early morning sunlight was filtering through the frosted glass panes of the large arched window, pushing the shadows across the dark wooden floorboards and slowly illuminating the room. Oh, but I didn't account for the loud trucks. Oh well. Better than dogs, right? Ari was drifting through that fleeting moment between dreaming and waking, when a vivid memory lands through the mental wall that blocked her early childhood and flashed into her consciousness. It was the same memory that she had before of her birth mother, except this time it was clearer and more complete, as though she was actually reliving it. Little Senna had felt her mother arrive before any of the acolytes even had a chance to tell her. She had been in the middle of her studies when she felt the familiar presence that was so much a part of her. Maybe with the loud trucks this isn't going to work. I didn't feel like they were that loud before, but then I had my headphones in. She had been in the middle of her studies when she felt the familiar presence that was so much a part of her that she finally felt whole again after its long absence. Without a word, she had swiftly darted from the room to the sounds of her tutor, Sage Onren, and caretaker, Rizura, anxiously calling after her. Now she was running excitedly through the temple's plexus-like maze of corridors, which she had memorized long ago, expertly navigating the labyrinth and easily dodging any pursuers before they could keep her from reaching her goal. She knew that she wasn't supposed to go into the public quarters of the Athosite temple, but she couldn't help herself. Her mother's presence was so close, and she felt no discord in the great song, warning her of danger, so she didn't see the harm in it. Turning the last corner that led into the large, pillared gallery of the greeting hall, she saw High Sage Emin quietly talking with a woman and two men, who were convincingly dressed as wayfarer supplicants. But Senna wasn't fooled. "Malu!" she cried out joyfully as she ran across the hall. Her mother turned towards the sound, and her face spread into a beautiful beaming smile, brighter than the golden sunlight pouring in through the windows. Senna jumped into her mother's open arms and wrapped her little body around her as her mother lifted her up in a tight embrace. She buried her face in her mother's dark, silky hair, breathing in the sweet smell of the fala blossom oil she always used. "My beautiful miracle child," her mother said blissfully before she kissed Senna's head and then rested her soft cheek against her daughter's. "I missed you so much, my sweet Senna," she said in her native dialect. Senna placed her small hand on the side of her mother's face and merged her own inordinately bright Jaza into her mother's so that she could feel the overwhelming love Senna had for her and wasn't able to put into words. The sound of Rizura and the pursuing acolytes running into the hall and abruptly skidding to a stop caught everyone's attention. Sage Onren followed a few moments behind them, immediately bowing to High Sage Emin, and then to Senna's mother, and panting out his apologies in common speech. "Please, forgive us. We tried to keep her from the public quarters, but when determined, there is no stopping the child. Gratitude, Sage Orrin. There is no... Oh, no. Different person. Gratitude, Sage Orrin. There is no offense, High Sage Emin assured him before ushering them out of the hall. Sage Onrin had to lay one of his long-fingered hands on Rizura's sturdy shoulder to lean on her strength while he caught his breath. Senna felt bad for causing Sage Onrin to break his normally tranquil composure to chase after her. His people are inclined to long spans of steady stamina, not for short bursts of speed. High Sage Emin turned back and motioned for Senna's mother to follow. Come, Tele, he whispered, reverting back to her dialect but using her informal name. Before curious eyes and ears learn more than they should. He then proceeded to guide them towards the sanctum quarters, where only those who lived and worked in the temple were allowed to enter. Senna, still held tightly by her mother, glanced back curiously at her unfamiliar traveling companions, who were following silently behind them. They were obviously akin, but it was strange for Senna to feel the blood bond with them, since her parents were the only family she had ever known. The two Daisen men were tall and strong, with the hard, aloof look of seasoned warriors. She looked into their crystalline amber eyes and felt fear slice through her, causing her to immediately hide her face in her mother's neck. Her mother must have picked up on the fear since their Sazai were still connected. There is no need to be afraid of them, precious girl, her mother whispered to her. They are my brothers, I have told you of, and they are here to protect us. Her mother didn't understand. Senna leaned back to look into her mother's eyes. I am not afraid of them, Malu, she thought to her sadly. They are afraid of me. The harsh sound of Ari's alarm clock ripped through the memory and brought her jarringly back to the present. The memory and the clear understanding of who she really was regrettably vanished as soon as she became aware that she was lying on her bed in her room at Sion's Keep. What the heck was that? She threw off her covers and stood up on her left leg to turn off the incessantly screeching alarm clock, which was signaling that it was 5:50 a.m. It rested on top of her chest of drawers as a way to force her to wake up, by making her stand up to turn it off. Grabbing her crutches, Ari quickly went over to sit at her desk and started writing down every minute detail of the memory she could possibly recall. When she was done, she sat back and tried to assimilate what she could from all the new information. My thoughts were abnormally mature for someone so young. Are Anu children born with more inherent knowledge than humans? That would explain why I was able to learn so much more quickly than the other kids I grew up with, even after I was trying to dumb myself down to fit in. It was strange to think about how people mold themselves to fit what their cultures and environments expect of them. Ari felt that the person she was then wasn't anything like who she is now. How she thought, how she acted, how she spoke. It was like a completely different person. It was as though she was seeing a memory through a stranger's eyes. Ari would have to talk all of this over with Hugo later. He was an excellent sounding board, and he was always eager for any information about the 7 higher races of Anu that she could give him, which hadn't been much so far. The only races she knew even a tiny bit about were the Daisen, which she now knew were her mother's people, and the Ions, which apparently were her father's people, since she was an unprecedented mixture of the two. Ari got up and crushed over to the full-length mirror attached to the closet door. Ignoring the long scar, like a thin trench that ran diagonally across her face, and the shorter one on her right cheek, she tried to figure out which features she had inherited from her mother, and which ones from her father. She couldn't remember anything about her father, let alone what he must have looked like, but comparing herself to what she remembered of her mother, The obvious differences were the set and color of her eyes. Instead of strange crystalline amber color that her mother's and uncle's eyes possessed, Ari's were a clear glacial blue, with opalescent flecks of colors human eyes couldn't see. There was also a subtle difference in the shape of her nose as well, but for the most part she figured her looks favored her mother's side. They had the same thick black hair with the silky iridescent sheen and the darker skin tone, though whereas her mother's skin was more of a mocha brown with copper undertones, Ari's was a mellower dark caramel. But if she had to be honest with herself, it was hard to even know what coloring she really had, since she had a disguising rune tattooed on her scalp, which could change the pigments in her hair and skin. From what she recalled of the memory, the only part of herself that she could see that wasn't covered by clothing were her hands. Her skin had basically the same color as it was now, but it had an unusual golden luster to it that she must have inherited from her Ayan father. She wondered how strange she must have looked to the people at that temple, where she apparently lived as a small child. Turning away from the mirror, she couldn't help thinking about the way her two huge warrior uncles had been scared of her. She figured that it had to have been more than just the aversion to the impossibility of her existence. They must have known that she was a Fluxi. To be fair, she couldn't blame them for being afraid of a small child that could siphon the life force out of them on a whim and had the imminent potential to control the energy flows of the cosmos. It only proved how much they must have loved, or at least respected, her mother, that they didn't just kill her child outright. That had been the precedent and accepted practice on how to deal with the Fluxi children that genetically popped up every couple millennia or so. They had to do it while they were still young and vulnerable, before they could reach maturity and become an unstoppable force of evil and destruction. A fact that Ari had painstakingly come to terms with about herself. Thankfully, she had come to the realization that it was a choice and not her destiny, and had definitively decided against being an evil monster. So not only was Ari an impossible hybrid of two alien races, deemed illegal by the galactic hegemony known as the Anu Kanai, she was also a Fluxi. Two major strikes against the right to live, at least according to Kale. Kale, she thought bitterly. She couldn't even think about him without feeling the sharp pain of his callous abandonment of her and Cam. After almost a year of living with him as her guardian and helping him find the jewel stones that would help him get back to Anu, he had tossed her aside like a broken toy, deemed unuseful after she had lost her leg while saving his life from the suits. But now, after the memories she just had, thinking of him not only brought pain, it also brought a whole other mess of emotion. Most of all, total and utter confusion. In the memory, she had automatically known that her long-lost uncles were related to her because of an intrinsic gut feeling, which her younger self had called the blood bond. When she had first met Kale, she thought that his energy felt different from everyone else's because he was the only non-human she had come in contact with on Earth. But now, how the heck could I be related to Kale? There was no possible way he could be her father, who, according to the memory, had been a part of her early life. Kale had been banished to Earth way back in 1948. Granted, he had said that most of the Anu higher races only aged about 1 year for every 10 human years, but until their children reached maturity, they aged like human children. And since she was only 14, according to her old doctor's best guess, the math just didn't add up. But he's Ayan, so that means they had to be related on her father's side. She couldn't see how he could be her grandfather either. And not just because he only looked like he was in his late 30s. He had told her that his only offspring had died in utero, when the love of his life, Sanriel, was killed by her evil, vengeful husband, Monarch. Maybe Kale's another uncle? She remembered him mentioning that he had a brother when he had told her about Sanriel. Or maybe he's a distant relative? What are the odds that the only two beings from Anu on Earth just happen to be related? There has to be a reason, she argued with herself, or the universe is more twisted and cruel than I thought. She figured that the blood bond was why she had felt the inexplicable need to prove herself to Cale, and why it bothered her so much when she felt that he didn't care about her. A subconscious part of her must have known. She was then hit with the heartbreaking reality that her only blood relative on Earth had rejected her and thought her worthless. Enough! She was done with wasting any more heartache on Lothan Cale. For his sake, she hoped that the whole blood bond thing was only a Dyson trait, because if he knew that she was his blood relative, and he manipulated and used her anyway, heaven help him if she ever saw him again. A pinging sound came from her skin cuff, which was still connected to its charger on her desk. Crouching back over to the desk, she disconnected the clear plastic-like cuff from the charger, put it on her forearm, and tapped it to bring up the home screen. She saw that it was a text from Cam. "Where you at, Pipes? Get your lazy butt down here." Oh, my leg's falling asleep in that position. It's asleep. Oh boy, it is noisy here. I might have to redo this whole chapter. Ari grinned down at the message and then glanced at the clock on the corner of the screen and realized she was 15 minutes late for her daily rehab session. It had been a little more than a week since she had come out of the depressive funk that had overcome her after Cale had ditched them, and she had realized that she was permanently scarred and missing the bottom half of her right leg. She had lost a lot of muscle mass during those couple weeks from barely eating. Now she was trying to gain it back, and so far it had been mostly core and upper body work in the gym with Cam and Wyatt, who was Gordon Reinhold's son and the Scion's Keep resident physical trainer. Today was a swimming day in the indoor pool, so she got out her bathing suit and put it on as quickly as she could. Ooh, my leg's coming back to life and it hurts. Ah! Oh! Ah! Today was a swimming day in the indoor pool, so she got out her bathing suit and put it on as quickly as she could. Then she put on a t-shirt and some loose basketball shorts over it. Crutching over to her closet, she slipped an athletic sandal on her left foot and grabbed her pool bag. Making sure it had her towel, goggles, and the waterproof wireless earbuds Joshua had designed and built for her. He and Miles were still about a week or so away from finishing her robotic prosthetic, but what he had told her of their progress so far was extremely promising. There was a quiet knock on her door. Quickly slinging the bag over her shoulder, she went over and opened it to see the twins, Soren and Skylar, eagerly awaiting her, adorably decked out in goggles, rings. Adorably decked out in goggles, water wings, matching bathing suits, and their cartoon character-themed towels draped over their shoulders. "Cam told us to come and get you because you're late," Skylar chirped out happily with a big grin. "Oh, he did he?" Ari asked while smiling indulgently down at them, and they both nodded emphatically like life-size bobbleheads. "Well then," she said as Soren took her bag so he could carry it for her. "Lead the way, minions," she said in a dramatic stage whisper, causing them both to giggle. They raced towards the elevator to see who would get to be the one who pushed the down button first. Ever since the day she had meditated by the fountain in the large inner courtyard, finding a karmic balance within herself and sharing with them her feelings of joy and peace, the 7-year-old twin brother and sister, with the big blue eyes and white blonde hair, had been her almost constant companions. The twins seemed to have seen and felt something in Ari that fulfilled a need in them, and they latched onto her wholeheartedly. They followed her around like little ducklings wherever she went, excluding school hours and when Ari insisted on private time, leading Cam to start referring to them as her minions. The name stuck. For the most part, she didn't mind the twins shadowing her around. They were sweet kids that helped her out when she needed it, and their precocious antics were entertaining. The adults encouraged it as well because Ari seemed to be a good influence on them, and for the most part, could keep them out of trouble. So the three of them managed to achieve a functional sort of symbiotic relationship. Boy, it is noisy here, my goodness. I think we're getting into the evening rush too. Hang tight. I hope I didn't just turn this video upside down. Ugh, I might have to redo this whole thing anyways. For the most part, she didn't mind the twins shadowing her around. They were sweet kids that helped her out when she needed it, and their precocious antics were entertaining. The adults encouraged it as well because Ari seemed to be a good influence on them, and for the most part, could keep them out of trouble. So the three of them managed to achieve a functional sort of symbiotic relationship. After a while, Ari had come to realize that Skylar used her crazy, teased-out hairstyle and unconventional clothing choices as a way to distract people from the wine-colored birthmark that practically covered the whole right side of her face. Ari didn't even really notice it anymore. It was just a part of Skylar, and she was an adorable and funny little girl who had a big heart and a bit of a mischievous side. She reminded Ari of her childhood best friend, Ainsley. Skylar's self-consciousness about her birthmark made Ari realize that she couldn't let herself feel down about her own appearance anymore, now that she had Skylar's big, impressionable eyes watching her every move. Ari had been thrust into a mentor role for the little girl, whether she liked it or not. Now she had to try to teach by example the lesson that her mom had tried to drill into her and Sadie while growing up, that it's a kind and loving heart and not a perfect appearance that makes a person beautiful. It was something that Ari needed a lot of reminding now, as she got used to her newly scarred and imperfect body. Whereas Skylar was usually hyper and larger than life, Soren was normally very shy and low-key with his stoic demeanor. The adults had thought he might be slightly autistic due to his inability to emotionally connect with people, but Ari figured out that it wasn't that he was unable to socially connect and empathize with people. It was that he empathized too much. He was extremely sensitive to other people's emotions, and Skylar was sensitive to his. So as a way to protect them both from being bombarded by other people's emotional baggage, Soren intentionally shut everyone out except for Skylar. That day by the fountain, Ari had been able to get past his defenses and let him feel some joy and happiness. Somehow, when he was around her, she was able to act as an emotional buffer for him, which allowed him to be the happy and good-natured little boy he was always meant to be. So as a way to repay Ari, he would carry her things around and open doors for her, which prompted Skylar to want to be helpful as well. Ari would also find his origami creations left for her as gifts in random places. When she woke up one morning and found a paper rose on her pillow lying right by her face, she knew that he had used his ability to open her locked door and had snuck into her room in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. That had completely creeped her out, and she had to lay down some ground rules on privacy, especially since the twins shared the room that was right next to hers. Normally, the boys' rooms were on the 3rd level and the girls' were on the 4th, but they had made a special exception for the twins, at least until they became too old for it to be socially acceptable for her brother and sister to share a room. Ari remembered how when she was younger, she used to follow Sadie and Hector around everywhere, and they had been patient with her, so she could be patient with the twins. The twins had somehow managed to push the down button at the same time, and by the time Ari crouched over to the glass elevator, the doors opened, and they jumped in and made room for her. Skylar pushed the button for the ground floor by smashing her palm against it before Soren could, and they both settled in next to Ari. As they rode the elevator down to the ground floor, they each rested their heads against Ari's scarred forearms. Her heart melted a bit at the sweet gesture, and she couldn't help feeling protective of her little minions. And that was chapter 2. I'm gonna listen to it back and see if it's at all feasible to keep. Might have to end up redoing the whole thing. But that was the end of chapter 2.